Get a driver's license in Colorado and you are signed up to vote. You get mailed a ballot. Democrats push that as a way to get more participation in elections. They likely did not expect hundreds of people to be registered to vote at the same house. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger went to find out why there are more than 200 registered voters at a single duplex.
Keansburg, about 50 minutes northeast of Denver. Population, 1,191. 500 happy people and a few soreheads. And 207 of those happy people and soreheads appear to be registered to vote at 2 units in this duplex.
I'm just a very curious, interested person in the sense, and when I looked at this one address in Weld County, it popped out a lot of people registered there.
Mike O'Donnell is a Republican candidate for Secretary of State. He paid the $50 to get the voter roll in Colorado. He tweeted last week about many people registered to vote at this one duplex in Weld County.
I posted it to my 300 followers on Twitter, not expecting that anyone would see it because no one ever sees anything that I tweet.
Well, it was seen and shared by the thousands, requiring me to do some research to find the explanation.
We run a truck driving school.
Brian Anderson teaches drivers to earn their commercial driver's licenses.
Colorado State will not issue a commercial learner's permit without a Colorado driver's license first.
That's where these units come in. This is student housing, the address out-of-state drivers use to get Colorado driver's licenses while they're here for the 4-week training. Drivers like Stephen, Marcus, and Nicholas, drivers who are now registered to vote at the same address because Colorado has automatic voter registration at the DMV. When you get your license and you are a citizen, you are automatically registered to vote. Then a letter comes in the mail asking if you want to change your party affiliation or decline your voter registration. If you do not return it, you're an unaffiliated voter and will get a mail-in ballot.
And whenever we would get registration packets or any sort of ballot, we return it right back to the sender, which is the county of Weld out here.
No funny business.
No funny business.
Well, I wasn't suggesting there was a problem. I'm just highlighting the fact that there are anomalies with the election roll.
But he kind of was with what he shared on social media. By the way, for those of you with really big TVs, you saw his numbers from that tweet were different than mine. His were active as of the end of December. Mine are as of now. This is a great time to remind people, Kyle, election fraud is if one of those ballots were to be returned by someone other than that person. It is not fraud to have a ballot sent somewhere and just never have that ballot returned.
Yeah, it's the act of voting as opposed to like paperwork moving around. So take like in Weld County, for example, Steve Curtis, who was the county Republican chair, when he forged his ex-wife's ballot,
right.
That's voter fraud because there was an actual vote involved as opposed to just a ballot going to the wrong
right.
spot.
And had that in that situation, had that ballot just come and never gone back for any reason, no fraud. And in this case, yeah, there are going to be 200, as of right now, there's going to be 207 people who get mail-in ballots, and Brian Anderson is going to send them right back to sender, and when that happens,
you sure better. Yeah.
They will be turned into inactive voters, meaning they do not get automatically a mail-in ballot. They'll have to do something proactively if they want to start receiving ballots again.
Unintended consequence, it appears, of motor voter law. All right, Marshall, thank you. Polling shows a majority of GOP voters still believe the big lie that the election was rigged. Lindell's election deniers rally featured Republican candidates for the U.S. House, U.S. Senate, and the star of the show, Secretary of State candidate Tina Peters. Election integrity is their buzzword. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger had some questions about ethics, law, and integrity.
Please help me welcome Tina Peters.
Support comes in many forms. On the steps of the state capitol, there were signs and cheers for Republican Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters. She faces felony charges accused of tampering with her county's election equipment. She also has to answer to an ethics complaint accusing her of accepting more money in gifts for her legal defense than an elected leader is allowed by the state constitution.
Marshall Zellinger from 9 News. I'm just curious about the ethics complaint and your legal defense fund. Do you know how much was in the fund before the website was taken down?
You just get right to the I'm here for that was something set up by my past attorneys, so I don't have any knowledge.
Support for Peters comes in the form of the Pillow Guy.
How much have you raised for Tina Peters' legal defense fund?
I just put all the money in myself.
How much is that?
I don't know. I probably put in 3, 4, 5, maybe $800,000 of my own money.
Unless you're a close friend or family member of an elected leader, you're limited in how much you can gift.
you can only give someone a gift of $65 per calendar year.
Jane Feldman was once executive director of the Independent Ethics Commission. Now she's part of the legal team in the ethics complaint against Peters. And if Peters receives more than she's allowed, she could be fined twice the amount. So if Lindell really gave her $800,000 to pay for her legal defense, the fine could be expensive.
That's $1.6 million.
But there is wiggle room if Lindell is a close friend. Except listen to how he answered a question about flying Peters around on his personal plane last year.
I give rides from people all over the country. I had never met Tina Peters. That's what the plane ride you're talking about. She came to the Cyber Symposium with a group from Colorado. I picked people up. I invited all 50 states. All 50 states were represented. There's your answer. Another stupid question by a stupid journalist.
But here's why it's not a stupid question.
If you had just met her, you weren't a close friend of hers.
I just met her that day. Another dumb question.
If he said he had just met her and they had no prior relationship, it's very hard to argue that he was a personal friend.
Ultimately, what the Ethics Commission will have to determine is, was any gift to Peters based on a personal friendship or the person's political or elected position? I could rewind 20 seconds and answer that question and think that it's probably because of the person's political or elected position.
Yeah, I was about to say, you have to believe that that tape is going to get played in the Ethics Commission when somebody asks, were you close friends with her? Clerk Peters then spoke publicly for the first time since her arrest at a gathering in Castle Rock last night. The conservative group FEC United held what was called an emergency town hall. It was a who's who of election conspiracy theorists, including one who suggested hanging Colorado's Democratic Secretary of State. Said that to applause inside a church. Here's politics guy Marshall Zellinger.
For 3 hours Thursday night, FEC United hosted what it called a, quote, emergency town hall with Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters and special guests.
So you may know me as the #1 most dangerous election denier in Colorado.
That special guest is Sean Smith, an election rigging conspiracy theorist who at this meeting said, without proof, he had evidence of criminal election conduct by Colorado Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold. Then, in a church, he more than hinted at ignoring one of the 10 commandments.
You know, if you're involved in election fraud, then you deserve to hang. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. I was accused of endorsing violence. I'm not endorsing violence. I'm saying when you put your hand on a hot stove, you get burned.
You know, I took it very seriously. I reported it to State Patrol.
Griswold learned about this threat through social media, where she has received numerous threats, which she shared with us and law enforcement.
Usually nothing happens. And it's very concerning because we're seeing these attacks against secretaries of state, predominantly women.
The threats of hanging elected leaders did not start last night.
If you see any articles that are out there that talk about Joe Oltmann is talking about sending people to the gallows, I did. I said that. I said that, you know, the adequate response for treason is 100% being hung by your neck till you're dead.
Joe Oltmann, the head of FEC United, has pushed that narrative on his conservative podcast and speaking events multiple times.
And by the way, if you don't like me talking about the gallows and hanging those that are traitors against our country, change the law because it's in the Constitution that you should be hung.
Thursday night's comments were at The Rock, a church in Castle Rock. I stopped by there today to see if the church and the pastor who attended the event supports the idea of hanging the Secretary of State and if the church would have FEC United back again. The pastor told me he was against the deadline and would like to sit down with me later, but that it was not a simple yes or no. It is. I have received many questions about how an event like that can impact a church's tax-exempt status. I reached out to the IRS to get some basics. I am by far not an expert on this still, but a church can have a public forum. However, if there is support for or against any specific candidate, that's where it gets a little squirrely.
Perhaps we could ask the church if they'd be interested in hosting the hanging. I imagine with the amount of death threats against the Secretary of State, she's got to have protection.
She has third-party protection, not always State Patrol, and she's asked for more funding and received more funding from the state to hire third-party protection, security. She is pushing for a new state law that would give her, the Attorney General, and the State Treasurer the same State Patrol protection that the Governor and Lieutenant Governor currently have.
Just kind of goes without saying, if you're a public official doing your job, you should probably not get assassinated for it. Weld County's Republican clerk just uploaded 55,000 images for every ballot turned in during the June primary. You can recount them yourself. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger explains why that'd be a waste of your time.
This is an actual Weld County voter ballot filled out and turned in for the June 28th primary. This is another actual ballot. And this. And this. It goes on and on and on. 55,378 Weld County ballots posted online on purpose.
It's really just to give more transparency to continue to try and build our trust back in our elections.
Weld County is part of a pilot program posting scanned ballots online. Ballots, once separated from the envelope, are impossible to track back to the specific voter who sent them in.
We're to the point where it's not just, trust me, but it's trust and verify.
Republican Weld County Clerk Carly Koppas is realistic about who this will help and who may never be convinced.
I don't know if it necessarily would do away with the likes of Ms. Peters and some of her very contagious supporters. However, I'm going after the people that I would call the opportunity group, the ones that have the questions and concerns, but haven't really gone to the extreme as she has.
Not every ballot is simple to decipher, like this one, where the voter unnecessarily crossed out the candidates they were not voting for, but in the process, put a line through the circle telling the ballot scanner there's a mark there. This is an example of a ballot that would be reviewed by 2 election workers of opposing parties.
It said, this is an overvote. So again, humans, tell us what to do, because we're saying that they marked a vote for all 4 of them.
In this example, you can see the voter picked 2 candidates for Republican Secretary of State, but the 2 human adjudicators did not count a vote for either candidate. In this example, the voter crossed out their vote for Ron Hanks, but the computer still sees 2 marks. So 2 election workers of opposing parties reviewed it and rightfully told the computer to count the vote for Joe O'Dea.
You have the opportunity to sit at a Friday night with whatever your preferred beverage is and look at my ballots in my election.
Colorado's new 8th congressional district covers parts of Adams, Larimer, and Weld counties. Political groups out of Washington, D.C. are spending millions on political ads because the winner could help determine which political party has control of the House in Congress. As of September 1st, Congressional District 8 had 46% unaffiliated voters, 27% Democrats, and 24% Republicans. While I was away, Kyle filled in admirably.
That needs context.
But I'm back for the truth tests, starting with one paid for by the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is connected with Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
Caraveo was proud of her bill that could kill thousands of Colorado energy jobs. It was called a threat to livelihoods across the state.
Let's slow down and separate the different claims here. Yes, in a 2020 Denver Post candidate questionnaire, Caraveo said she was proud prime sponsor of the 2019 bill that changed how oil and gas would be regulated in Colorado, with a focus on public health and safety. She did not say she was proud because it could kill thousands of jobs or be a threat to livelihoods. And because of COVID-19, we don't exactly know how much of that is because of the bill. Data from the state's Department of Labor and Employment shows direct oil and gas employment is down 12,000 jobs from March 2019 to March 2022. That's 37%. In that same time frame, oil and gas-friendly states have also had a decline in oil and gas jobs. Texas is down 25%, Alaska 32%, and Wyoming down 40%.
She pushed a gas tax hike and the elimination of Tabor to fund her extreme agenda.
This is a bit extreme itself. Caraveo did not push a gas tax hike, but she voted yes for the 2021 bill that was going to add a new gas fee of 2 cents for every gallon pumped. She also voted yes for the bill this past year that delayed that fee till next year, conveniently after the November election. And on the website she used when she ran for state representative, part of her platform was to end Tabor and let the state keep money that currently gets refunded back to residents. Tabor still exists. You know how you know Tabor still exists? That $750 or $1,500 check you just got? That was a portion of next year's Tabor refund. Caraveo also voted yes on a bill to get that money to you sooner. She is among the Democrats who want to get rid of Tabor, but also voted to get you your refunded money faster from Tabor. An interview from the newspaper The Guardian begins our snap truth test of the debate between Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold and Republican challenger Pam Anderson.
It drives your partisan rhetoric. Things like when you told The Guardian,
I believe that if you vote Republican on the outcome of an election, that United States Americans would lose their right to vote within 3 months.
I never said what she just tried to put words in my mouth. And if you go back and pull the quote, it said many Americans could lose the right to vote and our fundamental freedoms are at risk in several months.
Here is that article, which we reported on at the end of August. The flashy headline, "The U.S. could lose the right to vote." Griswold's claim, extreme Republicans would strip Americans of the right to vote. No, the country is not losing its right to vote, but voting restrictions are happening. The Brennan Center for Justice tracks new restrictive voting laws across the country, policies like adding ID requirements or limiting mail ballot options. They count 20 states with restrictive voting laws in effect for November's election. Restrictive does not mean losing the right to vote. The Brennan Center also counts 11 states that expanded voting laws this year, including 4 states with Republican secretaries of state. Another disagreement during our debate was over a 2019 state bill that added voting options in Colorado.
I worked with our legislature to lead a law that increased drop boxes. It guaranteed access on public universities and tribal lands. It increased in-person voting. And in 2019, you testified against the bill and you tried to kill it.
My opponent dropped a bill that no election official in the state had seen, that cost millions and millions of dollars and could not be implemented. 61 of the county clerks across the state opposed the bill, and it was my job to go to the table.
3 years ago, Anderson was the head of the County Clerks Association, and she did testify against the bill during its first committee hearing in the House, and then interviewed with me a week later.
The issue is, does this solution fit the problem?
She told me her concern was the cost of new in-person voting centers instead of technology to speed up the check-in process. Did she try to kill it? No, because by the time the bill got to the Senate and amended with county clerk input, her position went from opposed, meaning against the bill, to neutral. Marshall Zellinger, 9 News.
Spanish-speaking voters in our state are being targeted with some ugly and false disinformation. Anti-transgender messages in Spanish are being mailed to voters by a group that's led by the architect of former President Trump's most hardline immigration and border policies. Here's politics guy Marshall Zellinger.
This Spanish-language mailer starts with Joe Biden and progressive politicians and their leftist allies in government, and then the rest is full of misinformation and anti-transgendered content.
Neither of us are fluent, but we know enough, understand enough that we knew this was disgusting propaganda.
Michael Ramirez and his wife, Debbie Velasquez, each got this in the mail in Thornton.
We sat there together translating words here and there, and it was like ugly. Esterilización, sterilization.
Puberty blockers.
Puberty blockers, yeah.
Bloqueadores de la pubertad. And also removing healthy genitals.
Yeah.
Removiendo los senos y los genitales sanos.
The mailer is from America First Legal Foundation, run by Stephen Miller, who was a senior advisor to former President Trump. It's a dark money group, meaning America First Legal Foundation does not have to reveal the people who help pay for these mailers. The mailer is full of anti-trans rhetoric, quoting The Daily Wire, a conservative website led by Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring.
We have transgendered friends, so this does not reflect us at all.
So why did Debbie and Michael receive this? America First Legal Foundation did not respond to my request for information about how many and where this was sent. But Debbie and Michael have a suspicion about why they each got one.
I think it's just because of our last names.
Yeah, I think it's from the voter rolls, and they just went down and looked for Velasquez, Martinez, Ortega, Ramirez.
That group is also airing radio ads on 3 Spanish-language stations here in the metro area. The mailer does not advocate for or against a candidate, but Kyle, it is clearly anti-democratic. And Debbie and Michael both live in the boundaries of the new Congressional District 8. They live in Thornton, and we know how contentious that race can be.
Mm-hmm. We should say the issue of transgender rights has not really been at issue in the 8th Congressional District between Democrat Yadira Caraveo and Republican Barb Kirkmeyer.
No, and there have been discussions. I know I got help listening to a broadcast this morning on Spanish language radio where they were talking about this mailer and how it seems to be in the community believed to be scaring voters from maybe participating and giving false information. And they read this and maybe they don't want to be a part of it at all, or push them one direction perhaps.
There's no I in team, but there is in the political ad paid for by Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold, as she takes credit for accomplishments that were not entirely her own work. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger explains in his latest truth test.
I'm Jena Griswold.
Democratic Secretary of State Jena Griswold makes 4 distinct claims in her political ad.
It's why I expanded in-person voting.
Yes, but it was the state legislature that ultimately passed the bill that changed the election laws in Colorado, changes that have come with input from county clerks. A bill in 2019 updated how many in-person voting centers must be open based on the county's population. It also added in-person voting centers on college campuses. They're called voter service and polling centers, and there are around 350. In-person voting, though, does not impact most Colorado voters. In June, 1% of primary votes were cast in person. 99% turned in a mail-in ballot, the same percentage as last November. And in the 2020 presidential election, 6%, not quite 200,000, voted in person.
Launched a statewide system so every voter could track their ballot.
Yes, it's called Ballot Tracks.
Increased ballot drop boxes by over 65%.
Yes, but with help. The increase in ballot drop boxes was part of the 2019 state legislation that also added in-person voting centers. It also added drop boxes to college campuses. The number of drop boxes also increased because counties could get the cost covered through CARES Act funding.
And passed automatic voter registration, registering over 350,000 eligible Coloradans.
Saying she passed automatic voter registration is a stretch. It existed before Griswold. She helped modify how it works with a bill passed by lawmakers in 2019. Starting in 2017, drivers getting a license or updating their address at the DMV would be asked if they wanted to register to vote. You could decline on the spot. Now, because of that 2019 bill, you cannot decline to be registered to vote at the DMV. The DMV shares your info with the Secretary of State's office, which shares it with your county clerk. Then you get sent a mailer. You can opt out and not be registered to vote, pick a party, or do nothing and be registered as an unaffiliated voter. That's why there's so many unaffiliated voters now. I don't show it, but at the end of the ad, Griswold stands in front of a ballot box with people appearing to drop ballots off. I found out that video was shot in August. The ballot box was not unlocked, and the people were essentially taking paper to the ballot and then sticking it to tape so it looked like it disappeared.
So no like special favors involved in that.
No.
So this is interesting. So you flip on MSNBC pretty much any night of the week and you're going to see Secretary Griswold on there dragging election deniers and the folks who think that, mail-in ballots are rigged, machines are rigged or whatever else. And you thought it was noteworthy, the first claim that she puts in this ad.
You look at the claims and the first one impacts a small number of people about in-person voting. And the people who are big on in-person voting are the ones that don't want to turn in a mail ballot are the election conspiracy theorists. So why of all the claims is that the one front and center at the top of the ad? It stuck out to me, especially 1% in the most recent election. 15,000, not even enough people to fill Ball Arena.
Interesting. So you think that might be a nod to people who might not totally trust the election. Interesting. A political ad that's on our air now seems to have confused people more than anything else, if your feedback is our guide. So politics guy Marshall Zellinger busts out his truth test machine for this ad that talks about Congress and Amazon Prime's 2-day delivery.
With broken supply chains.
This is one of those political ads that does not tell you to vote for something or someone. It's the call your senator and tell them X. This one is about an antitrust bill in Congress in D.C. that would create more competition and reduce digital monopolies.
But Washington politicians have a law that could break Prime's guaranteed 2-day free delivery.
Perhaps, but what you just heard about Amazon Prime is not the whole story. There is a bill in Washington that could change the laws Amazon and other large online platforms must abide by. DU Assistant Political Science Professor Sarah Chatfield helps explain the gist of Senate Bill 2992.
The goal is increasing competition, basically, and giving less of a competitive advantage to the huge companies versus the small guys.
In a way, Amazon and companies like Google and Apple would have to level the playing field for what other businesses and customers can access on their platforms. One example of how Amazon offers 2-day shipping to Prime customers is when sellers of a product pay Amazon to manage the shipping through an Amazon warehouse.
The bill doesn't specifically mention Prime, but what it would do is prohibit companies like Amazon from requiring third-party sellers to purchase a service from them in order to receive a preferred status on their platforms.
The bill does not say Amazon could no longer offer 2-day delivery to Amazon Prime customers, just like it does not say Google can no longer offer Google Maps for free.
It would be a business decision by Google that they felt that under a situation with more competition, they didn't feel it was profitable to do that any longer.
The bill would not prevent the Amazons or Googles from offering their products. It would make it easier than it is now for the competition. If this bill were to become law, any violation could come with a steep financial penalty. The ad is paid for by CCIA, Computer and Communications Industry Association, which lists Amazon, as well as Apple and Google and other tech companies as members.